Good afternoon and welcome to today's financials webinar. My name is James Goliker. I'm going to be your host for today's demonstration. Please note all audio devices have been muted for quality assurance purposes. On closing today's session, I'll be unmuting all audio devices and you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions. Today's demonstration is going to be on our financials product. Today's demonstration in specific will be based upon our ASPE financials template. However, if you are interested in our US GAAP financials template or our IFRS financials template, I can advise you all of these products work in the same way. The primary difference between them is simply the content that is included, so this demonstration will be relevant for all financial products. As you'll be aware, our financials template is an add-on to our CaseWare Working Papers program. So you do require that program in order to work with the template. Now, when we consider our financials template, we need to consider that product from two perspectives. We need to consider it from both the master template perspective as well as the engagement level perspective. So for today's demonstration, we're going to start off at the engagement level. We're going to generate a brand new set of financial statements and we're going to discuss some of the key concepts when working with those statements. We're not going to spend too long at the engagement level before we shift our focus to the master template. That's where we'll spend the majority of today's session looking at how we manage, customize, and implement the product. Once we've finished reviewing our master template, we'll return back to our earlier engagement file and we'll see how any changes and decisions made at the template level will affect our pre-existing engagements. Okay, so I'm going to start by opening up my ABC company engagement file here. Now, I've done very little in this file. I've simply created it based upon your financials template. So when working with the financials template, when you create a new engagement, you'll provide that engagement with a name and you'll base it upon your financials template. So I've created this engagement file based upon the financials template. I've imported my working trial balance and that trial balance has been mapped. That is all I have done in this engagement. As of yet, I have not opened or generated my financial statements. Now, when we base our engagement files on our financials template, we inherit two key data sets from that template. The first is the documentation that we see here within our document manager. And the second is the mapping structure that we see present within this engagement. Now, the first key concept when working with our financials template is that we must maintain a consistent mapping structure between our master template and all engagement files. Now, that's very easy to do. Anytime we create a new engagement, we're basing it on the template, so we're automatically inheriting the mapping structure present at the template level. All you need to do is make sure that you maintain that consistency. So, should you add a map number to an engagement file, for instance, we need to make sure that we add that same map number back to our master template. Now, that's just an introduction. We're going to be talking about that concept throughout today's demonstration, as it is the mapping that controls the automation of your line items. Now, if we go back to our document manager, as I mentioned, all of the documentation we see here has been provided from our financials template. However, when we consider our financials template, we're really just talking about these two folders. So we have these additional folders. They have some useful documentation, but they will have no influence on the production of your financial statements. So when we're talking about the financials product, we're really talking about the financial reports folder as well as the template setup and control documents folder. For the vast majority of financial users, the 4 documents currently presented are the only documents that you'll be working with within the financials template. Now, our template setup and control documents folder must be present in all engagement files because our financial statements is reading information contained within it. That being said, typically we only access this folder at the master template level, so I'm going to minimize it at this time and we'll review that at the master template level a little later on. Now, at this point, I'm going to open up my financial statements for the first time within this engagement file. The first time we open up our statements in each engagement file, they're going to take a little bit longer to open than any subsequent event, and that's because the first time we open these statements, they're actually being built or generated by the program. After we've opened them for the first time, we're simply opening a pre-generated document like any other. The first time we open our statements, we are presented with this 3-step Getting Started guide. Step 1, we must complete the Entity Information ribbon. Step 2, the Global Setup ribbon. Step 3, the Statement Setup ribbon. So we're basically making our way from the right to the left. Once you have completed these first 3 steps, you are free to proceed with the production of your financial statements in any order of your own choosing. Now, you may notice here that my ribbons are currently running off screen. For that reason, I'm going to close my document map that we see here in the left-hand field. That is a very useful way for us to navigate around our financial statements. We can open and close that simply by selecting the document map option within our navigation area of CaseView. Now, as I mentioned, our first step is we must complete our Entity Information ribbon. Here, we're simply providing the program with pertinent information about the entity we are working on. So what type of entity are we working on? Is it a public company? Is it a private limited company? Is it a partnership? Etc. What is the assurance report type? Is it an audit, a review, or a compilation? Are you working within a private enterprise framework? Which areas do you wish to include or exclude from your statements? How many periods do you wish to present? And in what order do you wish to present those periods? Now, it is absolutely imperative that we complete each of these options prior to moving to our next step. Reason being, if we make a change to any of these decisions, and I'll change my assurance report type from audit to compilation, we're presented with a warning. In this case, the report type has changed. Are you sure you wish to delete these statements and start them over? I'm going to say no, and I'm going to change that back to audit. But please be aware, if we make a change to any of these decisions, our statements will be completely deleted and regenerated based upon the new criteria, including any relevant terminology and or content. So that brings us quite cleanly to our second key concept when considering our financials template, and that is that we do not support the creation of sub-templates. So often when a user receives a template, their first instinct is to make multiple copies. Perhaps you like one copy for your public company, another for your not-for-profit. One for your compilation, one for your audit, one for your yearly reporting, another for your quarterly, etc. So once again, we do not support that type of functionality. Instead, the program is far easier to use than that. You are only ever going to be working with a single master template. However, that template will modify itself based upon the type of engagement you are working on. In order for that functionality to take place, we must provide the program with information about the engagement we are working on. We do that in a number of locations. But this is the first key location where we're starting to provide entity-specific information that will determine which content terminology is included within these financial statements. So that's our first step. We've got to complete our Entity Information ribbon. Our next step is the Global Setup ribbon. Here, we're simply making global decisions concerning the appearance and behavior of our statements when considering the dates, currencies, balances, tables, and views. Now, a number of these options are duplicated at the master template level, where you are able to make these decisions across all statements that you produce within your office. We'll look at one or two of these options in a little bit more detail, but we'll do that a little later on at the master template level. Our final ribbon here is our Statement Setup ribbon. Now, this particular ribbon is cursor sensitive. As my cursor is currently located within the cover page, here I see all relevant information concerning my cover page. If I use my bookmarks here, however, and I jump down to my balance sheet, that still reads cover page until I place my cursor in the balance sheet statement area. When I do so, it updates to reflect balance sheet, and now I can start to enter any relevant information concerning this statement area. So what do I want to name the balance sheet? Do I require a classified or an unclassified presentation method? Do I want to include budget, percentage columns, etc.? So those are the first 3 steps we must follow in all engagements. First, we provide information about the entity we're working on. We make global decisions concerning the appearance and behavior of our statements. We access each statement area, and we provide any pertinent information. Once we've completed those first 3 steps, as I mentioned, you will be free to proceed with the production of your statements in any order of your own choosing. Now, the next thing I want to talk to you about here is going to be our automation. And I'm going to use my balance sheet to illustrate that. So if we look at our balance sheet here, we have a 5-column table. While we are presented with 5 columns, the only column of any consequence is column 1, and column 1 represents my mapping structure. So should I make a change to a map number, the associated description and balances will be automatically updated. So that is why we must maintain a consistent mapping structure between our template and all engagements. It is the mapping that controls the automation of your line items. The next concept I want to introduce you to here is our skip and hide feature. You'll notice that some line items are listed in a black font, while other line items are listed in a blue font. Those line items listed in a blue font are those line items which do not have any information associated with them. Blue font within our program represents information that while presented, it is being ignored by the program. So, if I were to print these statements, if I were to save them as a PDF, we would not see any of these blue line items. If we'd like to see our statements as they will appear when printed, from the Home ribbon, underneath View, we have the ability to hide any skipped rows and columns. When we do so, only pertinent information is presented. Now, that's a very important feature, as what that allows us to do at the master template level is it allows us to build our statements based upon our entire mapping structure. Providing that we've built our statements based upon the entire mapping structure at the master template level, it means that no matter what engagement we are working on, all line items that should be included will be included. Any line items which may not be relevant for a specific engagement will not have any balances associated with it, so will automatically be skipped and hidden or ignored by the program. Once again, theoretically, this will allow us to have a single statement that will automatically populate correctly across all engagements that you produce. So that's an introduction into our skip and hide feature. Now, the last concept I'm going to touch on before we shift our focus to the master template level is going to be our knowledge libraries. So as you may or may not be aware, your financials template comes pre-populated with a large amount of content. We store that content in what we refer to as our content or knowledge libraries. To access those libraries from our content management ribbon, under content we can select insert. Each statement area has its own library. Each library is pre-populated with content. The amount of content you will find will depend upon the financials product that you are interested in and the library itself. So for instance, in our notes library, you will have between approximately 1,000 and 1,400 disclosure notes, depending upon the product you are interested in. In this case, in our balance sheet library, we're going to have just 6 examples of a balance sheet: 3 classified and 3 unclassified. Now, you'll notice here that only classified balance sheets were made available to me. That is because in my balance sheet statement setup ribbon, I specified that I required a classified presentation method, so my library was automatically filtered by that choice. Here we can see 3 examples of a balance sheet that have been provided by CaseWare, and then we have a 4th balance sheet here named My Balance Sheet. This is a balance sheet that I created prior to today's session. We could tell I created this balance sheet because it is firm-owned. Any content you create in-house will be firm-owned content. Any content provided by CaseWare is CaseWare-owned content. Now at this time, I'm going to pull in my balance sheet from the balance sheet library. We're not going to see too much change here. Our first line item will return to read cash. Underneath that, we're going to have an additional line item which reads outdated line item. So I'm pulling in that balance sheet from the balance sheet library for 2 reasons. The first is to present how we pull content from our libraries. The second is so that I can present the update process. So in just a moment, we're going to shift our focus to the master template level. at the master template level, I'm going to be making a change to my balance sheet in the balance sheet library. In specific, I'll be deleting this outdated line item. On closing today's session, we're going to return back to our financial statements, and I'll show you how we can automatically push updates out from our template to all relevant statements. Okay, that is it for our engagement level demonstration for the time being. We will be returning here again on closing our session to take a look at that update process and how changes at the template level affect our pre-existing statements. For now, I'm just going to go ahead and close that down. Now, for today's demonstration, we started off at the engagement level. And we did that for two reasons. One was to give you a point of reference as we made our way through the options at the master template level. And the second was so that I could show you that update process from beginning to end. However, once you've installed the CaseWare once you've installed your financials template, your very first step prior to working on any engagement level files is going to be to customize that template. So once installed, we open CaseWare Working Papers, we select Templates, and we will find our template registered here. We can double click on it from this location in order to launch it. So we are now at the master template level. Here we see all of the same documentation we've seen at the engagement level because this is where that documentation was sourced from. The first thing we want to do to customize our template is go to our account menu and assign mappings. The reason we come here is from this location we can review the mapping structure provided by CaseWare in its totality, and we can make any modifications to that mapping structure that we may require. Once you have standardized your mapping structure, you are ready to begin customizing your financials template. Now once again, lots of documentation here, but we're really just referring to these two folders and typically the 4 documents currently presented. At the template level, we're usually not going to be working within our financial reports folder because we're not generating any statements here. We're simply setting them up so that we can generate them in each individual engagement. For that reason, I'm going to minimize this folder at this time. So once we've standardized our mapping structure, we go to customizing for the template. Our first document here is our CQ or organizational settings document. Now, when this document opens, we will see 5 areas in the left-hand field. Once we've completed each of these 5 areas, we have finished customizing our financials template. At that point, we are ready to begin working on our engagement level files. Please remember that any information you enter at the template level will affect all statements that you produce within your office. So first here we have our firm information. Very straightforward. Here you'll simply enter your practice information if applicable. This information will automatically populate in any relevant areas of your financial statements such as your auditor's report. We want to enter this information at the template level because it will be consistent across all statements. This way we don't have to keep re-entering the same information into individual engagements. Next, we have firm mapping and grouping. Now, there are no actions for you to complete here. This is simply a documentational area. I'll invite you to come and read this documentation at your own convenience, but once again, the key concept that is really being conveyed here is that we must maintain a consistent mapping structure between our template and all engagement files. Next, we have staffing. This is simply a direct link to our CaseWare Working Papers protection setup. For that reason, I'm going to bypass that for today's demonstration. We want to focus our time on just the financials products. Next, we have our organizational standards. Now, this is where you are going to spend the majority of your time when customizing your financials template. So, in the left-hand field, we have 8 areas. Looks like we have a lot to complete, but really, we can break these down into just 3 key areas. And of those 3 key areas, you are only likely to work with a single area on an ongoing basis. That area will be your knowledge library or your central repository of information. This is where we recommend that all content is built, modified, and managed within your organization. Our next key area is our style sheets. For those of you familiar with the concept of style sheets from other programs such as Word or Excel, our concept is the same. The execution of this tool, however, is a little bit different. For those of you unfamiliar with the concept of a style sheet, to some extent within our financials template, we treat our content and the formatting of our content as two separate entities. What that allows us to do is that allows us to apply multiple formats to the same content. So effectively what it allows us to do is it allows us to change the appearance of our financial statements between 8 different predefined formats, and we refer to these as style sheets. So out of the box we've been provided with 8 style sheets. 4 of those have been predefined, 4 of those have been left open for your firm customization. Now our third key area basically consists of all remaining options. So all of the options we see listed here, which are not our knowledge library or our style sheets, are what we refer to in-house as our set and forget options. So these are just a collection of settings. You're going to apply your firm preferences and standards just a single time. Once you've done that, you're very unlikely to revisit these areas. For that reason, I'm going to be going through all of the set and forget options really quite quickly. I'll provide you with a summary of each area. I'll point out any key tools. Once we reach our knowledge library, I'll slow down significantly. That's the higher concept area. That requires more of our time and attention today. So our first set and forget option is our names. Very straightforward. Here we are simply going to define the default name for each statement area. So out of the box, my balance sheet will be referred to as balance sheet. I could choose an alternative description from the provided drop-down, or I can select other to specify a name of my own choosing. So that's pretty straightforward. Now throughout our organizational standards, you are going to find this lock column. What the lock column does is it changes an option from a default to an absolute rule. So each option we see that has a corresponding lock is duplicated within the menus of our financial statements at the engagement level. Each time we lock an option down at the master template level, the duplicate option will be removed from our financial statements. So we use our locks for 2 key purposes. The first is to apply consistency in the appearance and behavior of our statements, and the second is to streamline our menus. The more options we lock down at the template level, the fewer options will be available to us within our statements at the engagement level, making it easier for us to navigate and find the options that we are actually interested in modifying. As a general rule of thumb, all options we know that will not change between one set of statements and the next, we want to lock down. Any option which may change on a statement-by-statement basis, we leave unlocked so that we can make that decision in each individual set of statements. Okay, so that's our lock columns and that's our names. Next we have our general settings. So once again, just entering our default options here. Do we wish to include a cover page? Yes or no. If you always wish to include a cover page, lock the option down, pay no further attention to it. If we scroll down here, we have some options which are more concerned with the appearance and behavior of our statements. Where do we want to show our date? Do we want to show that in the heading or above the description column? How do we want to order our columns? Current period first, last, etc. Next we have our data reporting. Here's where we're going to define the default data reporting period for all statements. Next we have our logos. Here you can browse out to and attach your firm logo to your template. Once you've attached your firm logo to your template, you can specify where you would like that logo to appear. So on my cover page, show the firm logo only, the entity logo only, or both the firm and entity logos. Now obviously entity logos will be engagement specific, so those will be attached in each individual engagement file. Next we have formatting. Our formatting is split up into the 5 key areas of underline, currency, sign, groups, note number, and other. So once again, just defining our defaults, our default underline color, type, table heading border. Would we like a sinking currency sign, a rising currency sign? Where would we like to position that currency sign? Our groups are a little bit different. Out of the box, we've been provided with 12 group labels. Simply put, a group label is a label which we assign to a group of cells. So if we select our numeric table group as an example, our italic description here updates And what this description tells me is which cells are going to belong to this group by default. And the cells that will belong to my numeric table group by default will be any numeric cell within a numeric table. So perhaps I wish to present my statements based on 2 decimal places. I can make that decision at the group level as opposed to modifying individual cells and or tables. Next we have our note numbers. Out of the box we have been provided with 3 note number levels. From here we can modify the appearance and behavior of each. Finally we have other. Our other formatting options are quite simply all formatting options that do not fit into one of these 4 categories. So what do we want the default space between our columns to be? Do we wish to reserve space for brackets? How do we wish to display our negative, positive cells, etc.? Chances are a number of these options will be consistent across all statements that you produce. So here you have an option to start locking down your preferences, streamlining your menus, enforcing your consistency. Our last set and forget option is our page setup. Our page setup is a very well documented area, works exactly the same at the template level as it does at the engagement level. We can modify the page setup either by the whole document or by an individual section. To modify by the whole document, we select whole document from the provided drop-down. We will receive our step-by-step instructions. Same is also true for an individual section. Okay, so that is it for our set and forget options. Now, I appreciate I went through all of those really quite quickly. I hope you can see, however, just a collection of settings. You'll apply your firm preferences and standards just a single time. Once you've done that, very unlikely to revisit those areas. Now, our final area here is our knowledge library. Once again, this is our central repository of information. This is where we recommend that all content is built, modified, and managed within your organization. That being said, we do not prevent you from building or modifying content directly within your financial statements at the engagement level. We simply do not recommend it. Any content that is built into your corresponding libraries will be available to all users within your office from any workstation and any engagement file. That content will be automated, it will be updatable, and it will have the intelligence to know when to include or exclude itself from a specific set of statements. Now obviously that's just a summary. We're going to go through some of that functionality. Before we do, I can advise you that all of these libraries work in pretty much the exact same way, with one exception, and that exception is our notes library. So for today's demonstration, we're going to start off in our balance sheet library, then we'll look at just the differences in our notes library. This should give you a pretty good understanding of how and why we work with our libraries. So first, the balance sheet library. Okay, so we're now in our balance sheet library, and as you can see here, we already have some content pre-populated into it. So at the beginning of today's session, I generated a brand new set of statements in my engagement level file. At that time, I pulled in my balance sheet from the balance sheet library. And I explained the reason for doing so was to present the update process. And that in particular, I would be deleting this outdated line item at the master template level. So that's what I'm going to do at this time. I'm just going to go ahead and delete this row. Okay, now that I've made a change to my balance sheet, I must advise the program that a change has taken place, and I do that using my version numbers. So the current version number is 1.0, however, I've made a modification, so I'm going to update that to 1.1. Alright, that's it for my balance sheet. On closing our session, we'll return back to our earlier engagement. I'll show you how we can automatically push those updates out from our libraries to all relevant statements. Now, in each library, we have just 4 key buttons available to us. Those are going to be to add new firm content, delete existing firm content, select available content, and then finally, edit content rules. So we're going to start by adding some new firm content. Now, within our financials template, we are never creating any new information from scratch. We are always leveraging from pre-existing data. So if I wish to create a new balance sheet, first I must choose an existing balance sheet to serve as my base or template, I'm going to base my new balance sheet on the classified balance sheet provided by CaseWare, and OK. Okay, so as simple as that, I've created a new balance sheet in my balance sheet library. First thing we must do whenever we create any new content within our libraries, we need to provide that content with a name so that we can identify it later. I'm going to refer to this as new balance sheet, and OK. Alright, so at this point, we're going to go over the automation one more time from the master template perspective. I'm going to make some recommendations concerning how you may choose to build your statements within your libraries. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the capabilities of the content provided by CaseWare. So first, the automation. Once again, we're reviewing a balance sheet. Once again, the only column of any consequence is our map number column. So here's how the automation works. At the engagement level, the first time I open my financial statements, the program will automatically build or generate those statements on my behalf. When it is, for example, putting together my balance sheet, it will say the first line item underneath current assets is map number 111. That is the only information that the program is going to take from the master template level. It's not concerned with any descriptions or balances, only map numbers. Now, providing that you have a consistent mapping structure, and remember, you must have a consistent mapping structure, in all engagement files, map number 111 will represent your cash line items, so the cash description will be populated, as will any associated balances. So that's how the automation works. Now a recommendation concerning how you may choose to build your statements within your libraries. So typically when we're building a statement such as a balance sheet, we're building that statement with an end user in mind. So if I was building a balance sheet in Microsoft Excel for my agricultural client, underneath current assets, I would list all line items which are relevant for that particular client. What we are going to recommend is that when you build your statements within your libraries, rather than picking and choosing between the line items that you present, we're going to recommend that you build your statements using your entire mapping structure. Providing that you've built your statements using your entire mapping structure, it means that no matter what engagement you are working on, all line items that should be included will be included. Any line item which may not be relevant for a specific set of statements, will not have any balances associated with it in the associated working trial balance, so it will automatically be skipped and hidden or ignored by the program, allowing us to have just a single statement that theoretically will populate correctly across all statements that you produce within your office. Okay, so that's it for automation for the time being. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the capabilities of the content provided by CaseWare. You have all of the functionality that you would expect. We can add new lines, delete existing lines, we can add titles, subtotals, budget columns, percentage columns, etc., so on, so forth. If we click our current year cell here, you can see we have a rather large, rather complex formula used to populate this cell. Something that you should be aware of is that there should never be the requirement for you to build or modify a formula of this nature. You should be able to complete all actions in plain English. If you ever feel that you need to build or modify a formula of this nature, I'd encourage you to contact our technical support department, tell them what you are trying to achieve. There's probably another way to do it, you're simply unaware of it. Okay, so that's it for the creation and management of our content in our library. Our next option here is the ability to delete existing firm content. Very straightforward. We select any content that we no longer require and we can delete it. Please note, you can only delete firm-owned content. You cannot delete any content that has been provided by CaseWare because that is CaseWare-owned content. That brings us to our next option of select available content. While we cannot delete the content that has been provided by CaseWare, from this location, we can disable it. So my new balance sheet is based on CaseWare's classified balance sheet. I may decide I no longer have a use for this balance sheet, so I can disable it in this location and it will be removed from my libraries. If I change my mind in the future, you can always return here and enable any content. Our last option here is edit content rules. Now, at the beginning of today's session, I explained that we do not support the creation of sub-templates. Instead, we'll have just a single master template. That template will modify itself based upon the type of engagement you are working on. There is a number of features that allow for that functionality, but this is really the key feature that's going to determine which content will be included within your statements by default upon generation. If you choose to work with this feature, you can work with it in either a very simplistic way or a slightly more complex way, and we'll explore those in a moment. First, we're going to take a look at exactly how this feature works. So at the engagement level, I pointed out a few examples of where we provide the program with information about the engagement we are working on. Those were, do we require a classified or an unclassified balance sheet? What type of entity are we working with? A public company, a private limited company, a partnership, etc. Are we working within a private enterprise framework? What is the assurance report type, and what is the reporting period? So what the program is saying here is, if at the engagement level I specify that I require a classified balance sheet, then regardless as to the type of entity I am working on, framework I'm working within, assurance report type and reporting period, when I generate my financial statements, the classified balance sheet provided by CaseWare is the one that will be automatically generated or included by default. Now, a very simplistic way to work with this feature would be to say, well, I've created my own statement. So in all instances, instead of using CaseWare's classified balance sheet, I want to use the new classified balance sheet or the new balance sheet. And once again, that's regardless of entity, framework, assurance report type, or reporting period. A slightly more complex way to work with this feature would be to say, well, the new balance sheet is fine if I'm working on a compilation. But if I'm working on an audit or a review, instead of including the new balance sheet, I want to include my balance sheet. And once again, that's regardless of entity, framework, or reporting period. So all we're really doing here is we're using the provided attributes to specify which content will be included within our statements by default upon generation. Okay, that's it for our balance sheet library. Now we're going to move on, and as I mentioned, all of the libraries work in the same way with the exception of the notes library, so I'm just going to point out those differences. So here we find our 4 key buttons common to all libraries. If we start by adding new firm content, we see our first difference. In all other libraries, when we select to add new firm content, we are automatically presented with a list of available content to serve as a base or template. In our notes library, we must first specify a location for our new note. As we update each area, heading, topic, and subtopic, the subsequent menus will also be updated. So effectively what we're actually looking at here is a filing system. Now I'm going to create a new note in this location. I'm just going to refer to that as new note and OK. Okay, so now we are presented with available content on which to base our new note. As I mentioned earlier, depending upon the financials product you are interested in, your notes library will come pre-populated with between 1,000 and 1,400 disclosure notes. For that reason, I am going to recommend that you never scroll through this library. It can become very frustrating very quickly. We always want to start by collapsing all levels. When we do so, we will find that our notes are fairly intuitively located. If we still can't find a note that we're looking for, we can use our find feature and a keyword, or we can sort by any of the provided columns. I'm going to base my new note on the cash and short-term investments note provided by CaseWare, and OK. Okay, so here I have my new note. I am now free to go ahead and make any modifications to this note that I may require. The final key difference in our notes library is concerned with this option right here, Show Content Management Options. This is where we would update the version number should we make a change to this note in the future. We can also apply attributes. We can say this note is new, expired, or effective after a specific date or fiscal period, or applies to a specific set of standards. At the engagement level, we are able to filter our libraries via these attributes. Okay, so that is it for our notes library, and that is actually it for our organizational standards. So at this point, we have finished customizing our master template. So just to summarize, we've standardized our mapping structure. If applicable, we've entered our firm information. We've applied our preferences and standards in terms of those set and forget options. We've created or edited any content in the appropriate libraries, and then we may have modified the appearance of that content using our style sheets. Our final step before we can begin working on our engagement level files is we must first repackage the master template. Now for this particular concept, I'm going to go through the process first. I'll explain why we go through this process afterwards. It's just a little bit more intuitive that way. So I'm going to start by hitting the repackage button. And the first thing I'm asked to do is enter and confirm a password of my own choosing. The next thing we're going to see here will be our repackage wizard. Very straightforward, simply a next finish process. Here it is. So here we're going to select next and then finish. When you select finish, a CWP or CaseWare Packager file will be created in this location with this name. And of course you can browse out to specify a location and name of your own choosing. If you are working in an office where you have access to a shared server environment, you may want to save these CWP files to that shared server environment so that everyone can access them. I'll explain that in just a moment. Now, I'm not actually going to finish this process. Reason being is it takes a few minutes, and to be quite frank, it would be a waste of our time at this point. What I will do, however, is I'll show you one I've made earlier so that you have an understanding of the entire process. Okay, so here we see an example of a CWP or CaseWare Packager file that I have created previously. Now, if we double-click on our CWP file, we're presented with an installation wizard. You select Next, you have to agree to our licensing, Next, and then Finish. When you select Finish, you will install the Financials template. But you're not going to install CaseWare's Financials template. You are going to install your firm customized Financials template, taking into consideration all changes that you have made at the master template level. So why do we go through this process? Well, depending upon your environment, there may be just a single reason, or there may be a number of reasons. The first reason, common to all users, is it is the ultimate backup. So no matter what happens to your template, you can always recover it simply by reinstalling from the latest CWP file. Another reason that you may want to go through this process is to install the Financials template on any subsequent workstations. So maybe you work with a desktop in the office, but when you go out into the field, you take a laptop with you. In this way, you can install your Financials template onto that laptop, and you can leverage from all of the same information in the field that you have access to in the office. The final reasons for going through this process are all concerned with a multi-user environment. So we use the repackage process as a distribution tool. If you are within a multi-user environment, we are going to recommend that you assign either a single or a small team of what we refer to as firm authors. Typically a single user within your office that is responsible for managing, customizing, and distributing the Financials product. So this firm author would be the only user within your office who will install CaseWare's Financials template. They will then go through the process outlined in today's demonstration in order to customize the Financials template, and once they have completed the customization, they will repackage that template, creating your firm customized template, or that CWP file. You can then make that CWP file available to all other users within your office, and once again, if you do have a shared server environment, that's probably the most efficient way to achieve that. In this way, all users within your office will be working from the exact same base template. Now, another reason that you may want to go through this process is to provide any subsequent updates. So let's say, for example, on August 1st, you finish customizing your Financials template, And throughout the first 2 weeks of August, you're receiving a lot of feedback from the rest of your team. Hi, the financials template's great, but I found an error in this disclosure note. I have a line item missing in my balance sheet. I don't like the way this looks, etc. As the firm author, when you're receiving this feedback, you'll be making modifications to your template and updating the version numbers as applicable. We'll now say that in this example, it's September 1st, and you've noticed that you haven't had any feedback from the rest of the team in the last couple of weeks, and you're feeling pretty confident in releasing version 2 of your firm customized financials template. So you're going to repackage that template once again, creating a new CWP file that you will distribute to the rest of the team. They'll install that new CWP file in the exact same way they did their initial installation, except from this time they are installing an update, and in just a moment we're going to see how that update appears from the engagement perspective. That was the purpose of updating the balance sheet. Okay, so we are now finished at the master template level. I'm going to go ahead and close that down. And I'm going to open up our earlier ABC company engagement. Now, if we go into our financial statements, and obviously these are the same statements we were in earlier today, and we'll just jump down to our balance sheet, and once again, I'm going to close that document map. So first, if we go to our content management ribbon, and we go to content and insert, and let's go to the notes library. Here we can see the new note that I just created, ready for insertion into my financial statements. Now, I see this note instantaneously because I am my own firm author. However, if I had any colleagues, I would need to provide them with an updated CWP file before this content is added to their local libraries. Also underneath the content management ribbon, I can search through my notes library by those attributes we discussed, those notes which are new, expired, or effective after a specific date or fiscal period. Finally, I can check for updates. So here we can see I do have a pending update for my balance sheet, and if we look in the preview window, what we'll notice is that this outdated line item no longer appears because we deleted it at the master template level in that balance sheet library. Now, so that you have an understanding of what's going on here in the back end, when we select check for updates within our financial statements, it will compare all content currently within those statements to the exact same content in each library. If the program identifies a difference in version numbers, it will flag that difference as an available update, which is what it has done in the case of my balance sheet. Now, I'm happy to address this update, so I'm just going to say OK. The next thing we're going to see here will be our visual merge screen. It's going to split my screen into two separate windows. The top window will show me my balance sheet as it currently appears in the balance sheet library. The bottom window will show me my balance sheet as it currently appears in my existing financial statements, and the differences will be highlighted for us. So another way to think of this is going to be version 1.0 versus version 1.1 of the exact same content. I'm happy to accept these changes, so I'm just going to say close and say yes to proceed. If I do so, you'll see that my balance sheet has now been updated. That outdated line item no longer appears. If I check for updates, no pending updates were found. Now, the power of this particular feature is not always immediately evident, but what it means is that you're no longer managing your content across multiple users, workstations, and engagements. Instead, you're managing all content in one single central location. Every single set of statements that leaves your office will be consistent and correct as per the information within your libraries, unless you have intentionally decided to overwrite that information within your financial statements at the engagement level. Now, many of you may need the ability to create multiple sets of statements within your engagements. If that is the case, that can be achieved very, very easily using this plus financial statements button. It will add another financial statements document as well as another statement of cash flow worksheet to your document manager. And then depending upon the properties selected within that document and in that 3-step getting started guide, this financial statements will generate accordingly. So if, for example, you wanted one set of statements based on yearly reporting, another based on quarterly, we can achieve that very easily as those statements are automated. Now, before I unmute all audio devices and I start to take your questions, I'm just going to quickly wrap up here. We've just given you a very brief tour of some of our available resources. So first, we have our online help. Our online help is very well written. We could read it as if it were a manual. We can search a keyword. We can look up a specific topic. For the most part, the financials template is broken up into two categories. We have our template author topics and we have our user topics. Our template author topics are concerned with working with this product at the master template level. The user topics are concerned with working with this product at the engagement level. Next, we have our CaseWare Quickvids. This is by far the most popular resource for our financials product. Our videos will range anywhere between 2 and 10 minutes long, depending upon the subject matter, and covers all kinds of topics. So for instance, statement of cash flow worksheet, do-it-yourself tables, the creating of a file and the authoring of your template, a number of tutorial videos here to assist you. We also have Case Knowledge. Case Knowledge is our online archive of information. It is continuously updated, so we're going to select a product and then type in a keyword, maybe want to know more about styles, and then find articles. Our articles are typically written from a problem-solution type standpoint. So here is my problem. Here is your step-by-step instructions to resolving that problem. Occasionally they may be linked to videos or other resources. If you still can't find answers to your questions, you can always contact our technical support. And if you would like to undergo some formal training for your financials product, you can find those options available from this area of your website, or you can contact our sales department. If you have not done so already, please be aware that you can contact the sales department to receive a demo of the financials product before you purchase it. Also, if you do purchase the financials template, please be aware that you are entitled to a complimentary 1-hour implementation session. It's likely with myself, just an hour introduction to basically assist you in getting started with the product.